Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Saren Vale tried not to cry as she sat alone on the cold stone bench at the Moongate clearing, staring at the glowing ring where wolves found their mates. All around her, pack members paired off, laughing, touching, claiming one another under the silver lanterns. But no one approached her. No one ever did. She heard whispers behind her, sharp and cruel, slicing deeper than claws. She's too weak. She's cursed. No wonder no one wants her. Saren kept her hands folded in her lap, hiding how they trembled. Her clan had already abandoned her once. She refused to give these people the satisfaction of seeing her break. Then humiliation struck like lightning. Eldon Marich, a broad-shouldered warrior she once silently admired, walked past her with a smirk. He held another girl's hand, Thara Windcrest's, and lifted it high like a victory banner. Thara looked at Saren the way a wolf looks at wounded prey. "Still alone?" she asked sweetly. "How predictable." Saren inhaled sharply, forcing her eyes away. She should leave. Run. But her legs felt carved from stone. She had no mate, no place, no future, and everyone here knew it. And then the ground seemed to shift with a heavy, slow, deliberate footstep. A shadow swallowed the moonlight before her. When she looked up, a giant stood there. Alpha Draven Thornwild, leader of the Stormfell pack, towered above every wolf, his shoulders broad enough to block the lantern glow. His presence so powerful, even the wind seemed to step back. His dark hair fell loose around his face, wild as the mountains he ruled. His eyes, cold steel and storm clouds, locked onto hers like she was the only soul in the clearing. "Stand," he murmured, voice deep enough to vibrate the ground beneath her. Saren blinked, confused. She had never spoken more than 2 words to him. Why was he... Before she could form a thought, Drevin leaned in closer, breath warm against her ear, and his next word shattered the noise of the entire ceremony. "Act like you're mine!" The clearing froze. Even the music faltered. Saren's heart slammed against her ribs. What? She whispered, thinking she misheard him. Draven clenched his jaw once, as if something urgent and dangerous pushed him. "Now," he growled quietly, "before they mark you as unclaimed and take you." Take her? What did that mean? Who wanted her? Serene's pulse raced, but Draven's hand suddenly closed gently, but firmly, around her arm, lifting her to her feet with impossible ease. Heat shot through her skin as his massive frame moved protectively behind her, shielding her from every staring gaze. Whispers exploded around them like firecrackers. Why her? Is the Alpha choosing the Veil girl? She's nothing. Does he even know what he's doing? Saren stood stiffly, terrified and lost. Draven's grip tightened as if he sensed her fear. "Do not run," he muttered, "and do not look afraid." "But I am afraid," she breathed. His eyes flicked to hers, softer for a split second. "Then pretend." A shout broke through the crowd. Riven Thornwild, Draven's younger brother, pushed forward, eyes blazing. "Draven, think about what you're doing." "I have," Draven snapped. "Stay back." Something was wrong. Saren felt it, heavy and cold, like a storm rolling in behind her spine. Draven wasn't here because he wanted her. He wasn't choosing her because of desire or fate. He was choosing her because something, or someone, forced his hand. But before she could question it, he stepped around her and placed a large hand on her waist, claiming her in full view of every wolf. Gasps rippled. Eldon's smirk fell away. Thara's jaw dropped open, eyes flaming with rage. Serene's breath caught. His touch was warm, grounding, terrifying. Draven leaned down again, his lips almost brushing her ear. "I know you don't understand," he said quietly, voice rough with urgency. "But if you want to survive tonight, you need to trust me." Survive. That word stabbed straight into her chest. She swallowed hard. Why me? He didn't answer. Instead, Drevin lifted their joined hands high, a public claim, a silent warning, a declaration that shook the clearing like thunder. "The Alpha has chosen," someone shouted, and in that moment something ancient, something powerful seemed to shift in the air. Lantern flames flickered, the wind stilled, the moon glowed brighter. Seren didn't know whether to breathe, scream, or run. Before she could decide, a deep, distant howl echoed from the edge of the Hollowshade forest. Sharp, guttural, wrong. Not a celebratory call, a warning. Draven's entire body went rigid. Riven cursed under his breath. It's too soon. Draven stepped in front of Seren, every muscle tight with tension. Stay behind me, Seren, no matter what happens. But what is happening? She whispered, voice trembling. Draven didn't look back this time. He stared into the shadows beyond the clearing, his expression darkening. They came for you, he said. A chill shot down Seren's spine. Who? Draven exhaled slowly. The ones who want what runs in your blood. Seren froze. Her blood? She wasn't special. She wasn't powerful. She was barely accepted in a pack that didn't want her. Another howl erupted, closer this time. Draven moved fast, pulling her against him with one sweeping motion, his body curving protectively around hers. We don't have time, he growled. From this moment on, until I say otherwise, you are mine. Seren's heart slammed, against her ribs. But I don't even know why! He lowered his head, his voice a rough whisper filled with something dangerous and painful. Because if you're not mine, he paused, breath shaking, then you won't live long enough to find out. Another howl, this one answered by the wolves of Stormfell, preparing for battle. Seren felt Draven's hand tighten on her waist, anchoring her to him as the ceremony erupted into chaos around them. Whatever hunted her was coming, and Draven Thornwild, the cold, giant alpha, was the only thing standing between her and the darkness. Seren Vale never liked remembering the past, because the past always remembered her too clearly. It clung to her like old smoke, bitter, choking, impossible to wipe away. Long before she sat alone at the mating ceremony, long before Alpha Draven Thornwild told her to act like you're mine, there were moments that shaped everything that came after. Moments that whispered warnings she never understood. Moments that seemed small at the time, but were actually the roots of tonight's terror. Years earlier, she had arrived at Stormfell as a frightened girl, hands clenched, heart bruised, her parents, Marwyn and Corin, speaking in hushed tones to the elders. She hadn't known why they whispered. She hadn't known why they kept glancing over their shoulders. Only that they were running from something or someone, and she was the reason. The elders had accepted her family, but barely. The pack children mocked her for being too quiet, too strange, too different. She never shifted on time like the others, never grew sharp senses or fierce instincts. She was slower, softer, always one step behind. Wolves respected strength. Seren was not strong, at least not in the ways they valued. So she learned to fade into the corners, sit in the back of gatherings and pretend she didn't hear murmurs of Ashgrove Runt or Half-Blood Girl. But the person who confused her the most was Draven Thornwild himself. Even as a young alpha in training, he seemed carved from granite, silent, towering, intimidating. Yet she often felt his gaze catch her from across training fields or council gatherings. Not warm, not cold, just watching. As if she were a puzzle piece from another box. She always looked away first. One evening, when she was 15, something strange happened. She had been collecting herbs by the Emberwatch River when she slipped on wet stone and cut her palm badly. Blood dripped into the water, bright red, startling, and for a moment the river shimmered with faint silver light where it touched. She gasped and jerked her hand away, heart pounding. Wolves didn't make water glow. That wasn't normal. That wasn't anything she'd ever seen. And she wasn't alone. A figure stepped from the shadows that day. Varen Locke, a scout known for moving like a whisper. His eyes had widened slightly, surprised. "You should wrap that," he said, voice too calm, too neutral, like he was hiding something. Seren quickly bound the wound and forced a smile, pretending nothing happened. But Varen watched her for the rest of the night with the patience of a hunter waiting for his prey to reveal itself. After that, Seren began having dreams. Dreams of a moon that bled silver. Dreams of shadows stretching long fingers toward her. Dreams of voices whispering her name as though they had known it long before she was born. She never told anyone, not her parents, not the healers, not even Esmira Drell, the closest thing she had to a friend. Telling people made things real, so she stayed silent. And the silence grew heavier each year. When her parents died during a border attack against rogue wolves, Seren became completely alone. The pack gave her food and shelter, but not warmth, not belonging. Elders called her useful enough. Warriors called her fragile. Girls like Thara Windcrest called her pathetic, and she agreed with them more often than she wanted to admit. So when the mating ceremony approached, Seren expected nothing. She told herself she didn't care. But deep down, she feared one thing more than rejection, being unwanted for the rest of her life, being the girl no one chose. Draven Thornwild, on the other hand, was never allowed to go unnoticed. The future Alpha. The strongest wolf of his generation. The protector of Stormfell. Wolves whispered his name like a warning and a prayer, but Draven carried his own shadows. As his father grew ill, responsibility crushed him like falling stone. Every council meeting, every scouting report, every border threat, he carried them all with no place to set them down. Even Riven, his brother, didn't understand the weight entirely. Draven kept secrets locked behind his ribs, where no one could reach them, and one of those secrets had Seren's name etched into its core. The Thornwild seer, Malus, had once delivered a prophecy to Draven alone. A warning wrapped in riddles. Beware the girl whose blood holds the moon. She is hunted, and she is the key. Draven didn't understand it at the time, but he understood danger. So he watched Seren from a distance, making sure nothing touched her. He never approached, never spoke more than necessary, never revealed that he knew someone, or something, was searching for her. But danger doesn't stay patient forever. Weeks before the mating ceremony, Draven sensed a foreign presence near Hollowshade Forest. Wolves moving with sick jerks, growls that didn't belong to any living pack. Rogues twisted by something dark, something he had no name for. They were sniffing the wind, searching, following a scent that didn't make sense to him. Soft, ancient, moon-tinged. And when he realized whose scent it was, dread coiled inside him like a living snake. Seren Vale. She wasn't just a quiet girl. She wasn't just a misfit. She was a target. And Draven Thornwild would rather die than let anyone lay a hand on someone under his protection, even if Seren didn't know she was under it. So on the night of the mating ceremony, when he saw her sitting alone, vulnerable, surrounded by cruel whispers and hungry eyes, he made a decision that shattered every rule, every expectation, and every prophecy Malus had whispered. He chose her. Not because he wanted a mate, not because he needed a claim, but because the wolves hunting her were already in the forest, and they were getting closer. And Seren Vale had no idea the world she thought she understood was about to tear open. The blood in her veins wasn't ordinary. The dreams she feared weren't random. And the reason her parents fled the Ashgrove clan was finally circling back to find her. Docile, quiet, unwanted, serene. the girl with silver-touched blood. The girl Draven should have stayed away from. But destiny doesn't care about should. The moon hung low over Hollowshade Forest, a pale sentinel casting silver light through twisted branches. Saren Vale clutched Draven Thornwild's arm as they moved quietly between shadows, the weight of his presence pressing both comfort and fear into her chest. The mating ceremony had ended hours ago, but chaos lingered like a bitter perfume. Whispers followed them, distant eyes prying from the darkness, and every snapped twig made her jump. Draven's senses were taut as steel, muscles coiled beneath his coat, every movement precise. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice rough, a low vibration in the quiet forest. Saren wanted to ask questions, to understand why the world had shifted so suddenly, but she dared not. She only obeyed, letting the rhythm of his steps guide her as the shadows stretched longer, reaching for them like greedy fingers. Somewhere deep in the forest, a low growl rumbled, too deliberate, too controlled to belong to a wandering beast. Saren froze. Draven's hand tightened on her waist, signaling both protection and warning. The growl echoed again, answering from multiple directions. Wolves. But not wolves she recognized. They moved in silence, stalking, circling, testing the air, as if the forest itself had conspired with them. "Who are they?" she whispered, her voice trembling despite the warmth of his shadow. Draven's jaw tightened. "Not pack, not clan. They're hunters." He paused, scanning the darkness with eyes sharp as blades. "They know what they're looking for, and they'll stop at nothing to get it." The hairs along her neck stood on end. Hunters? Why would anyone hunt her? She had no power, no reputation, no value that she knew of, except for something buried so deep she hadn't even understood it herself. Her pulse thudded violently, threatening to betray her fear, but Draven's grip anchored her, a silent reminder that running wouldn't save her. He veered left, ducking under a low branch, moving toward a hidden path only he could see. Saren stumbled to keep pace, realizing how much of her world had been blind until now. She had lived in a pack for years, seen mountains, rivers, training grounds, council halls, but she had never known how fragile safety could be, how quickly the air itself could turn into a trap. And now, under the silver moonlight, she could feel the full weight of being a prey the moment she had been chosen. Draven's hand squeezed her arm again, and she forced herself to meet his gaze. He looked relentless, unyielding, and impossibly protective all at once. The kind of man who could crush you, or save you, with a single motion. A sudden crack of wood made her jump. From the shadows, Eldon Merrick stepped forward, sword drawn, eyes burning. "Draven!" he barked. "What are you doing with her?" His voice carried across the silent forest, bold, angry, and reckless. Saren's stomach flipped. Eldon had always been a predator in human form, but this was different. This wasn't a claim. This wasn't jealousy. It was hunger, and it wasn't for her heart. Draven turned slowly, his expression a storm. "Step back," he warned, voice low, cutting. "You don't know what's coming." Eldon laughed, a short, sharp bark. "I don't need to know. She's vulnerable. She's alone." Saren's hands shook. Alone? She wasn't alone anymore, not if Draven Thornwild was near. Not if the giant wolf in front of her had chosen her, even in a world that denied her existence. And yet, something in Eldon's eyes made her realize how quickly trust could be meaningless. Predators didn't care about promises. Wolves didn't care about loyalty unless it suited them. And she was starting to understand how terrifyingly small she truly was. Draven's lips pressed into a thin line. "I said, step back." His voice carried an edge sharp enough to split steel. Eldon hesitated for a fraction of a second, and that was all Draven needed. In a fluid motion, he closed the distance, standing in front of Saren as if he were a living wall. His height alone was enough to intimidate, but there was more. The raw power emanating from him, the air around him charged with an intensity that made the forest itself seem to lean away. Eldon blinked, startled, then scoffed, taking a half-step back. But it wasn't enough. From deeper in the hollow shade, low growls began to ripple through the trees again, almost synchronized with Draven's heartbeat. Hunters were closing in, and for the first time, Seren felt the weight of the prophecy Draven had carried silently all these years. The words she had overheard fragments of in Melis's warnings, blood that held the moon, hunted, the key, suddenly made sense. She wasn't just a misfit. She wasn't just fragile. She was a target, and these shadows knew exactly what they wanted. Draven turned to her briefly. Listen carefully. You cannot run. You cannot hide. You do exactly as I say. She nodded, swallowing hard, feeling her pulse hammer in her ears. Somehow, trusting him, felt safer than anything else in the forest, even though she barely understood why. The path narrowed, twisting between ancient oaks and moss-draped stones. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, as if the forest itself were alive and complicit with the hunters. Seren felt panic clawing at her throat, but Draven's presence was a tether, holding her against the tide of terror. We're going to the Starfin ruins, he said quietly, almost to himself. She glanced up, confused. The ruins? Why there? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze swept the trees, calculating, precise. It's the only place we can control. Walls, open sightlines, traps. If they want you, they'll have to face me first. His jaw tightened. Seren saw something there. Something older, deeper than protection. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. And for the first time she realized just how much she had been underestimated by everyone in her life. She had always assumed survival was about strength. She had assumed courage was about fighting alone. But with Draven, it was different. Survival was about trust. Survival was about letting someone else take the weight when the world became too heavy. And for Seren Vale, that was a lesson she had never been allowed to learn until now. She inhaled sharply, tightening her fists, and forced herself to follow the giant wolf into the growing shadows. The forest whispered around them, conspiratorial and ancient, and the hunters drew closer, their intent unmistakable. The hunt had begun, and neither of them could look away. The Starfin ruins rose from the forest like broken teeth against the silver moon, jagged stones twisting skyward, half swallowed by moss and vines. Seren Vale felt the chill bite through her clothes as Draven Thornwild led her up the uneven path, each step careful and deliberate. The ruins had once been a stronghold for an ancient pack, long abandoned, but the walls still held the weight of memory, of secrets too old to vanish. Lanterns swung from hidden perches Draven had prepared, casting flickering light over the carvings etched into stone, symbols that hummed faintly with energy Seren could almost feel. Stay close, Draven murmured. The forest behind them shivered, as though aware that hunters pressed in, unseen yet present, their snarls faint on the wind. Seren's palms were slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed that the ruins were supposed to be safe, but the shadows themselves seemed to whisper danger. She glanced at Draven, who moved like a shadow of his own, silent, immense, and impossible to read. Even in this place, walls could not guarantee survival. He stopped near the center of the ruins, tracing a finger along a carved symbol that pulsed faintly. This is the only place I trust to hold them off, he said quietly. Once we're inside, you'll understand why you cannot leave my side. Seren followed him, heart hammering. Every crack in the ruins seemed alive, every echo amplified by the empty space. Why me? She asked again, voice trembling. She couldn't understand why he had chosen her, why he risked so much. Draven glanced at her then, his eyes softening just slightly. "Because they are looking for someone exactly like you," he said. "Someone with your blood, your dreams, your mistakes." He didn't explain further, and she didn't push. She felt the weight of truth in his words without knowing its shape. The air was thick with tension, charged, humming with an almost imperceptible energy. It pressed against her skin, filling her ears with faint whispers, as if the stones themselves were trying to communicate. Draven's hand brushed hers. Not a touch of comfort. Not yet, but a tether, grounding her against the surging fear that threatened to unravel her. She swallowed, forcing herself to remember the prophecy. Blood that holds the moon. She had brushed off the words before, dismissed them as old superstition. But now, in the ruins, with hunters circling in hollowshade and Draven towering beside her like a living wall, she understood the prophecy was alive. From the corner of her vision, movement flickered. A shadow between stones. Seren tensed. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Draven's lips pressed into a firm line. "Yes. Keep your eyes open. They know we are here. This was only a temporary refuge. They'll test it." She felt panic rise, but his calm steadied her like a rock in a storm. "Test it? What do you mean?" she asked. "They will not hesitate to strike first," Draven said. "They are not like us. Not wolves. Not pack. They hunger for what you carry, and their patience is infinite. Every second you hesitate, they gain." Seren's stomach flipped. What was in her that made hunters risk the forest to claim her? She didn't know. She had never felt special. She had only felt invisible. And yet, the ruins, the forest, Draven's unwavering presence, everything screamed that she was not invisible anymore. She shivered, torn between fear and something strange, a thrill she didn't understand. Draven moved toward a corner of the ruins, where a collapsed archway had created a hidden alcove. "Here," he said, crouching slightly. "We can watch, we can plan, and we can protect. I need you to trust me completely. One false move, and—" He didn't finish. Seren understood. One false move, and she would die. She nodded, swallowing her fear. For the first time in years, she felt her heartbeat sync with someone else's, a rhythm larger than herself. Draven studied her closely, as though measuring her for some unseen purpose. "Do not hide," he said. "Not now. Not ever while I'm here. You must act like you belong. They will probe for weakness." Act like she belonged? Seren barely understood belonging, but she forced her shoulders back and squared her jaw. If she had to play a part to survive, she would do it. And if Draven Thornwild, the giant alpha, was willing to stake everything on her, then she owed herself nothing less than full courage. Yet even as she straightened, her body screamed against the tension. The hunters were near, every whisper in the wind a warning. And for the first time, she sensed a deeper truth. She had never been safe. Not with her parents. Not with her pack. Not even in the quiet corners of the Ashgrove lands. This was the first moment that the stakes were clear. She lived or died based on choices she had yet to make. The first sound came suddenly, a snapping branch from deep in the ruins. Seren froze. Draven tensed like a coiled spring. "Quiet," he hissed. Shadows moved between the columns of stone, shapes that didn't belong to the ruins. Their eyes glimmered faintly in the moonlight, calculating, cruel. "They're here," Draven murmured. His hand went to his sword, massive and dark, etched with runes that seemed to hum in response to the energy around them. Seren had never seen a weapon like it. It radiated power. And when Draven turned to look at her, expression grim, she realized the truth of what he had said earlier. She couldn't run. She couldn't hide. She had to stand, to act, to survive. Her silver-touched blood, whatever it meant, had drawn them to her. And now, in the ruins, she could feel the pull of her destiny tightening. Hunters closed in, shadows whispering threats that chilled her to the bone. And Draven Thornwild, his shadow stretching across her like armor, whispered one more time, "I won't let them take you. Not now. Not ever." Silence fell for a heartbeat. Then movement surged, faster, sharper, closer. Seren's breath caught. Her entire life had led to this moment. Not the mating ceremony, not the rejection, not the whispers. This. Survival. Choice. Trust. Blood. She didn't understand everything, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She had to fight. And Draven was the only reason she might live to see dawn. The first scream ripped through the ruins like fire tearing cloth. Seren Vale clutched Draven Thornwild's arm as a shadow burst from the trees, faster than any wolf she had ever seen, eyes glowing like embers in the moonlight. Her heart hammered violently in her chest, every instinct screaming to run, but Draven's presence held her rooted, a shield of raw power and unspoken command. The hunter's form leapt over a crumbled wall, claws extending, teeth bared. Draven moved before she even registered the motion, his hand gripping her waist, swinging her behind him as he drew his rune-etched sword with a hiss of dark energy. The weapon's edge caught the silver moon, gleaming like liquid night. Hunters poured from the shadows, dozens, silent and precise, their eyes fixed entirely on her. Serene's blood roared in her veins, a strange metallic taste flooding her mouth. She tried to breathe steadily, to think, but terror surged through every fiber of her body. She was a cornered prey, yet with Draven, somehow she felt the sharp edge of hope threading through the fear. His grip was firm, unwavering, as though nothing in the world could touch her while he stood there. Draven's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay close! Do not let them touch you!" His command was more than words. It was an order that carried power, authority, and the promise of vengeance. The hunters hesitated for a fraction of a second, and Draven used it. He moved like lightning, swinging his sword with precision born of years of survival and countless battles. Every strike was calculated, a dance of death, a warning, "You do not take what is mine." One hunter lunged from the side, claws scraping stone, and Draven intercepted, knocking him back into the shadows. Seren's eyes widened. She had never seen combat like this. Raw, fluid, terrifying. She wanted to look away, to shield herself, but her gaze was drawn to him. Every motion was deliberate, protective, beautiful in its deadly rhythm. She could feel the surge of his heartbeat through his touch, feel the force of his strength anchoring her in a storm she couldn't otherwise survive. And in that moment, she understood the truth she had never known. Draven didn't just fight for pride or power. He fought to keep her alive. That was what made him terrifying and magnificent. The hunters were relentless, moving in tight formations that seemed almost unnatural, as if they shared one mind, one purpose. Draven blocked, parried, and struck, all the while murmuring instructions to her in short, precise phrases. "Left. Duck. Now." His words were like lifelines, small cords anchoring her to survival. Seren obeyed blindly, her own hands trembling, lungs burning. Her feet stumbled over stones, but he caught her, held her, turned her out of the way just as a hunter lunged. Then he growled, low and primal, a sound that made the hunters pause, a deep, resonant vibration that carried through the ruins. They hesitated, not long, but long enough. Draven's eyes swept over the shadows, calculating, predatory. "They're testing you," he said briefly to her, voice low, breath rasping. "Testing your fear. Testing if you run. They want your panic to betray you." Seren tried to focus, tried to steady herself. She realized then that the terror she felt was not just fear of death. It was fear of being powerless, of being the one thing everyone wanted, yet no one would protect without him. And yet, he did. Draven Thornwild, the giant alpha, had chosen her, and now the full weight of that choice crashed down on her like a tidal wave. One hunter, a massive figure, taller than most wolves she had seen, clad in dark leather etched with runes that glimmered faintly, charged at them with an unholy speed. Draven intercepted, swinging the sword in a wide arc that sent the creature sprawling backward. Seren gasped as he moved closer, pressing his massive frame between her and danger. His chest heaved with effort, sweat glistening on his dark skin, eyes storm gray, filled with fury and calculation. "Watch me," he said quietly, almost under his breath, "and do exactly as I do." Seren's hands shook, but she mirrored his stance, ready to run or duck or leap at his command. Another hunter approached, and Draven slammed the flat of his sword against a stone, sending a vibration through the ruins that made the enemy stagger. A howl erupted from deeper in the forest, the Stormfell warriors responding to his call. Reinforcements? Perhaps. But Seren didn't dare hope. For now, it was just her and him, against creatures who wanted something she could barely comprehend. The metallic taste of fear and blood filled her mouth. And yet, even in the terror, even with adrenaline spiking through every vein, she felt the thread of trust between them, small, delicate, and fierce. Suddenly, a hunter broke formation, leaping directly at Seren, claws outstretched. Draven twisted, deflecting it with his sword while simultaneously yanking her behind him, narrowly avoiding impact. Seren felt a jolt of heat and relief, realized her heart had stopped entirely. Draven's eyes found hers for a brief moment, dark and intense. "You cannot falter," he growled. "Do not hesitate. Your life depends on it." She nodded, unable to speak, hands curling into fists, and then something inside her shifted. A strange pull she had never noticed before. Her blood, touched by the silver glow of the moon, pulsed violently. Hunters recoiled, sniffing the air, growls hesitant. A warmth spread through her chest, a rising energy she could not name. Draven noticed. His eyes narrowed, calculating. "Yes," he murmured. "It's awakening." She didn't understand, but instinctively she realized that whatever power stirred in her, it was their only chance. And Draven's hand on her waist tightened, grounding her as the hunters circled, sensing it. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, every shadow trembling. Time slowed. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Draven moved like a living storm, felling hunters with strikes precise and brutal, his focus absolute. Seren followed, ducking, twisting, running exactly as he commanded. The closer the hunters drew, the stronger the pull in her blood became. She felt something awaken in her, something old and dangerous. And then she realized that Draven hadn't just chosen her for protection. He had chosen her because she was the key to survival, the key to something ancient, something the hunters had been seeking for decades. The weight of destiny pressed on her, terrifying and electric. And even as she trembled, even as the ruins echoed with growls and steel, she understood the truth. She could not survive without him, and he could not protect her forever. The hunters were relentless, the shadows unyielding, and the night was far from over. Seren Vale's knees trembled as she crouched behind a broken column in the Starfin ruins, her heart hammering with the rhythm of a drum in the midst of war. The hunters' snarls echoed through the crumbling stones, a sinister chorus that wrapped around the ruins like a living thing. Draven Thornwild stood before her, massive and unyielding, sword held ready, muscles taut, every movement a calculated promise of protection. He didn't glance back. His eyes scanned every shadow, every flicker of movement, every whisper of intent. "Now," he growled, voice low but commanding. Seren inhaled sharply, tasting the metallic tang of fear and adrenaline, and something strange awakened within her. An electric pulse from her veins, silver-touched and urgent, urging her to act, to protect, to claim a power she had never known. The air thickened around her, charged with energy she couldn't name but recognized as part of herself. Her palms tingled. Her ears caught sounds the hunters did not intend her to hear, the smallest shift of stone, the softest brush of fabric. Draven noticed, of course. His eyes flicked toward hers for a heartbeat, storm gray and intense. "Good," he murmured just above the wind. "Feel it, don't fight it, let it guide you." The next wave of hunters surged forward. Their movements were coordinated, precise, almost inhuman. Draven met them head-on, swinging his rune-etched sword with ferocious elegance, deflecting claws and snapping jaws with a strength that seemed unstoppable. Seren, trembling, mirrored his movements as best she could, ducking low, pivoting on heels slick with moss, letting her instincts sync with the energy pulsing from her blood. One hunter lunged directly at her. Seren froze, then felt the pulse surge stronger. Without thinking, she flung her arms forward instinctively. A sharp, silver energy shot from her fingertips, striking the hunter squarely in the chest. He stumbled backward with a hiss, snarling, disoriented. Seren's eyes went wide. She had never done that before. Never. Her blood, the thing that had always made her feel different, fragile, alone, was powerful, alive, and dangerous. Draven's lips pressed into a thin line. He didn't touch her. He only nodded once, acknowledging the spark. "It's awakening faster than I expected," he muttered. "Control it. You cannot lose yourself now." Seren's lungs burned, her mind spinning. Fear mingled with exhilaration, confusion, and a deep, unshakable thrill. Each movement she made, each pulse from her blood, pushed back the hunters just enough to survive another second. She realized the energy was responding to emotion, to intent. The stronger her fear, the wilder it became. The stronger her focus, the sharper it cut. Draven moved like a shadow around her, his presence both anchor and catalyst. He deflected a hunter's swipe with a swing of his sword, then glanced at her briefly. "Focus, Seren. Don't let fear drive it. Direct it. Make it obey you." She nodded, mouth dry, stomach tight with adrenaline. She had always wanted to be useful. She had always wanted to matter. Now, standing behind Draven, surrounded by hunters whose intent was death, she realized she finally could. Finally, she had a purpose that mattered. Life or death, survival or extinction. And Draven Thornwild, the alpha who had taken her without question, was teaching her, guiding her, trusting her with the most dangerous thing she had ever faced, herself. A growl deeper than the forest itself rolled through the ruins. One of the hunters, a larger, more grotesque figure, slipped between shadows with unnatural silence, aiming straight for Seren. Her pulse spiked. Draven moved like a coiled spring, but it wasn't fast enough. The hunter's claws grazed her shoulder. Pain flared, sharp and immediate, and with it a surge of silver fire shot from her blood. It ripped through the hunter like lightning, throwing him backward against a stone wall with a crack that echoed through the ruins. Seren fell to her knees, chest heaving, staring at her own trembling hands. The hunters froze, hesitation in their eyes. They had underestimated her. Even in her fear, even in her uncertainty, she was not weak. Not anymore. Draven moved beside her, hand pressing gently against her back, grounding her. "You're learning," he said. His voice held awe she hadn't expected, wrapped in the edge of command that had kept them alive this long. "Now keep going. Do not stop. They will test you until they break, but you cannot break. Not tonight." For the next moments the ruins became a battlefield where instincts clashed with raw power. Seren's silver energy pulsed, rising and falling with every heartbeat. Draven moved with her rhythm, anticipating attacks, giving short, precise instructions. Left, forward, hold your ground. Every hunter that dared approach was met with either his blade or her awakening force. The deeper the fight, the more Seren understood the bond forming between them. Not words, not promises, but a living connection. They were in sync, predator and protector, alpha and claim, guardian and key. Every motion of hers seemed to be magnified by his guidance, every instinct sharpened by his proximity. She felt something stirring deep in her chest, a courage, fierce and unrelenting, that hadn't existed before. And as she struck another hunter with silver-touched energy, forcing it back into the shadows, she realized the hunters were starting to falter. They didn't understand her. They didn't understand that the girl they thought fragile was the force that could destroy them. And she didn't yet fully understand the depth of her own power. Finally, one of the hunters retreated, hissing a low, frustrated snarl. The rest followed, slipping back into the Hollowshade forest with caution, as if the ruins themselves protected Seren Vale. She sank to the ground, shaking, chest heaving, limbs trembling. Dreven's massive hand rested on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "You did it," he murmured, voice low, rough with exhaustion and pride. "You survived. You controlled it. And they know now, you're not someone they can take lightly." She could barely speak, staring at her hands, still trembling. I didn't know I could." Draven's eyes met hers, storm gray and intense. "I know," he said softly, "and they will never know you fully. Not while I breathe. Not while I stand here." A strange warmth spread through her chest. Fear still lingered, pain still throbbed, but beneath it all, something new took root. Confidence, strength, the understanding that together they were unstoppable, that the bond forged tonight, through fear, through blood, through silver energy and shadowed battle, was something neither she nor the world could undo. And as Draven's gaze softened for the briefest moment, she realized that for the first time in her life, she had a place, a protector, a purpose, a power, and she was not alone. The ruins were silent now, save for the distant rustle of Hollowshade Forest, where hunters had retreated but left a lingering threat in their wake. Seren Vale sank to a moss-covered stone, knees trembling, as Draven Thornwild stood guard, muscles coiled and senses stretched like steel wires. Her hands were still tingling with residual energy, silver-pulsed, alive, and terrifying. She traced the faint lines on her palms, watching them shimmer faintly in the lantern glow. "I didn't know I had that inside me," she whispered, voice trembling with awe and fear. Draven crouched beside her, massive shadow engulfing her like a protective wall. "Few do," he said softly, eyes scanning the forest edges. "Blood, like yours. It's old, ancient. They've hunted it for decades, waiting for it to surface. You don't understand yet, but you're the key to something far bigger than survival." Seren's stomach twisted. Key. She had survived neglect, rejection, isolation, but she had never imagined her blood carried purpose or power. And now, under Draven's storm-gray gaze, she realized that the fragile, unseen girl she had always been had transformed into something dangerous, something worth protecting, and worth hunting. Her mind raced. Questions tumbled over one another, impossible to answer, but she couldn't contain the need to ask, "Why me? Why am I so special?" Draven's jaw tightened. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her, as though weighing whether she could handle the truth. Finally, he spoke, voice low and deliberate. "Because your blood is tied to the moon, silver-touched, ancient, powerful. It's not just your energy awakening tonight. It's a force that can tip the balance of power between packs and hunters alike. They want it, and they will not stop." Seren swallowed hard, the enormity of it settling over her like ice. Her life had always felt small, insignificant, And yet now she realized the world had noticed her in ways she had never imagined. Power, danger, target, and Draven, the giant alpha who had chosen her, stood beside her as her shield, as her anchor. And perhaps, in ways she dared not yet name, something more. Draven shifted slightly, scanning the forest with precise, calculated movements. "You need to understand how to control it," he said. "Tonight was only a test. They wanted to see how quickly you could respond, how fast the blood would awaken, how much chaos it would unleash." His fingers brushed against the stone beside him, tracing an ancient rune etched into the surface. It pulsed faintly, responding to the silver energy still flickering through Seren's veins. "This place," he continued. "The ruins. The runes. They amplify your power. But you must remain calm. Fear feeds them. Focus feeds you. Let the blood obey, not consume." Seren tried to nod, but her chest heaved with exhaustion, adrenaline, and awe. She had never imagined she could wield such energy, let alone survive its release under attack. And yet, here she was, trembling but alive, seated beside the alpha who had risked everything to claim her. Trusting him felt natural and terrifying at once, like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the fall might save her instead of kill her. She wanted to speak, to ask more questions, but she was exhausted. Words would come later. Actions had spoken tonight, and the ruins themselves seemed to whisper approval, faintly glowing in response to her silver-touched blood. A distant howl echoed from deeper in Hollowshade Forest, low and warning. Seren flinched, and Draven's hand brushed hers, grounding her. "They will return," he said. His voice carried both certainty and warning. "The hunters will not stop until they have what they came for. We need to prepare." She felt panic rise, but it was tempered by a strange clarity. Her blood pulsed gently now, aware of danger, awake and alive. She could feel its rhythm entwined with Draven's movements, with the ruins' energy, with the pulse of the forest itself. The world was larger, stranger, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And yet, for the first time, she felt capable, strong, present. She had survived, learned, and awakened. And she had done it beside someone she trusted more than she had trusted anyone in her life. Draven's presence, solid and relentless, had anchored her to reality in the midst of chaos. And now, the next steps loomed. Understanding the hunters, understanding her blood, and understanding the bond forming between them, silent, dangerous, and unbreakable. Draven leaned closer, voice low, almost a whisper meant only for her. "There are secrets your blood holds, Seren. Secrets your parents hid. Secrets that may be more dangerous than the hunters themselves." Seren's breath caught. Her parents. They had fled for her, left her behind, protected her, but never explained. And now every unanswered question about her, lineage, her abilities, her place in the world pressed down with weight she had never imagined. I don't understand," she admitted, voice barely audible. Draven's gaze softened, the storm in his eyes tempered by something like regret. "You will," he said, firm and unyielding. "But first, you survive. You control. You trust." The simplicity of his words belied the complexity of the reality they faced. Every moment beyond this would test her, body, mind, blood, and heart. And yet, she could feel it. She was no longer alone. Not while Draven Thornwild stood beside her. Not while the ruins hummed beneath her feet. Not while her silver-touched blood pulsed with awakening power. The bond between them, fragile and dangerous, was forming. And she understood, deep in her bones, that this bond would define not only her survival, but the fate of everything hunting her. The night stretched on. Lanterns flickered in the ruins, casting shadows that danced like living predators. Draven remained vigilant, every muscle coiled, every sense alert. Seren sat beside him, trembling, exhausted, and yet brimming with new understanding. The hunters had come, and she had survived. Her blood had awakened, and she had glimpsed its raw potential. And most importantly, Draven had claimed her, not for ceremony, not for tradition, but for survival, for protection, for destiny. A slow warmth spread through her chest as realization sank in. She was no longer fragile. She was no longer unseen. And in the quiet aftermath, with the ruins humming beneath their feet, she dared to hope. The hunters would return, the world would test her further, but she had awakened. And with Draven Thornwild at her side, she was no longer alone in the storm. The morning sun filtered through the ruins, dust motes shimmering like silver in the light. Seren Vale sat on the edge of a crumbled wall, her hands still tingling with residual energy from last night's battle. The forest beyond Hollowshade was quiet, almost deceivingly peaceful. Draven Thornwild stood nearby, massive and vigilant, eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of movement. Seren could feel the weight of yesterday pressing on her, heavy and unrelenting. The hunters had retreated, but their threat lingered like smoke, wrapping around the ruins and her chest, reminding her that survival was never permanent. "We need to move," Draven said, voice low, commanding, yet gentle enough to anchor her spiraling thoughts. "The pack needs to know what's coming. You cannot face this alone." Her pulse quickened. Pack. She had always felt like an outsider, invisible, unworthy. And now, after the awakening, after surviving the hunter's first strike, she realized that being seen by her own pack would be just as terrifying as facing the hunters. Eyes would judge her, whisper, question. She didn't know if she wanted approval, or if she even deserved it. But Draven's presence steadied her, and she followed him, without hesitation, each step carrying her closer to truths she had long avoided. Stormfell's council hall sprawled before them, stone walls darkened by centuries of weather and history. Wolves of every rank moved through the hall, tension rippling through their postures. Eyes followed Seren as she entered, and whispers curled like smoke around her ears. "It's her." The one the Alpha claimed. Draven's massive hand rested lightly on her shoulder as they approached the central chamber. He had always commanded respect, and his presence now, combined with the bond he had claimed, made the murmurs falter. The elders, led by the imposing Malus, greeted him with cautious deference. Their eyes flicked towards Seren with curiosity and something else. Fear. The prophecy, the whispers of silver-touched blood, had not been forgotten. Draven did not speak at once. He let the room simmer in tension before drawing in a breath. "Hunters struck Hollowshade last night," he said, voice steady, echoing in the hall. "They came for her, for Seren Vale, and they will return." The room stilled. Whispers died. Every wolf, every elder, every council member knew that hunters were not common intruders. They were shadows of death, relentless and precise. And now their prey was a young female wolf, silver-blooded, whose power could turn the tide of their world. Seren felt her pulse spike under the weight of eyes, whispers, and unspoken expectations. Draven guided her to the center of the hall, and she lifted her gaze. She began, but the words faltered. She wasn't used to speaking in front of witnesses, wasn't used to standing as more than a shadow in the corner. "They came for me," she finally managed, voice trembling. "And her breath caught." Memories of the battle surged, the surge of silver energy, the fear, the exhilaration. She shivered. Draven's hand brushed hers, a silent anchor, a reassurance that she would not falter. "I survived," she finished, quieter but firmer than before. Eyes widened around her. Whispers rippled once more. Surviving was one thing. Awakening power was another. And the elders knew, as Melis's lips tightened, that Seren Vale was no longer the fragile girl they had dismissed. She was something else. Something dangerous. Something essential. And the weight of that truth pressed down on her chest, heavy and unyielding. The council murmured among themselves, debating strategy, risk, and the implications of Seren's silver-touched blood. Draven spoke over them, cutting through the tension like steel. She cannot face this alone. She must be trained, guided, protected. Hunters will not wait. They will not forgive. Her blood is the key, and if we fail... His voice trailed, but the threat was understood. Seren felt a flicker of fear, but it was tempered by determination. She had survived once. She would survive again, and this time she would not be invisible. Melis stepped forward, her gaze sharp, scrutinizing Seren as though reading her soul. "The blood," she said quietly. "It is older than any of us. It carries the memory of the moon, the hunt, and the shadows that came before. You, child, are tied to forces you cannot yet understand. And yet, you must learn." Seren swallowed hard. She felt the enormity of her existence pressing on her, impossible to dodge. And yet, Dreven's hand remained firm on her shoulder, grounding her, reminding her that she was no longer alone. That she had a protector who would not let her falter. That she was no longer invisible, fragile, or powerless. Later, as the council dispersed, Dreven guided Seren to the training grounds behind the hall. The air was crisp, sunlight slicing through clouds, illuminating the field in stark clarity. "You need to learn to control it," he said, voice low, commanding but patient. "Not just in battle, but in every movement, every thought. The hunters will exploit fear, doubt, hesitation. You cannot allow them." Seren nodded, her mind racing. Each movement, each pulse of her blood was part of a rhythm she had barely begun to understand. "I don't know if I can," she admitted, voice soft. Dreven crouched beside her, storm-gray eyes locked onto hers. "You already did," he said. "Last night. You survived. You awakened. You controlled it when it mattered. That is strength. That is power. That is who you are." She swallowed hard, feeling warmth seep through the fear and exhaustion. For the first time she believed him. She had survived. She had awakened. She had been claimed by someone who saw her, understood her, and believed in her. And though the hunters were still out there, still circling, still relentless, she knew that together they would face them. Together they would survive. And together they would uncover the secrets that lay hidden in her blood, the mysteries her parents had shielded, and the destiny that had been waiting for her all along. As Draven led her through the motions of training, each strike, each movement synchronized with her energy, Seren realized that her bond with him was no longer just protection. It was partnership. It was trust, forged in fire, blood, and silver energy. And though fear lingered, it was tempered now with confidence, power, purpose. The hunters would return. Secrets would reveal themselves. And when they did, Seren Vale would no longer be the girl who sat alone. She would stand, silver blood blazing, beside the giant alpha who had claimed her. And the world would know that she was no longer to be underestimated. Night fell over Hollowshade with a suffocating weight, thick and still, the moon barely piercing the dense canopy. Seren Vale crouched behind a collapsed wall in the Starfen ruins, chest heaving, silver-touched blood pulsing violently beneath her skin. The air vibrated with tension, charged with the approach of predators who had waited for this moment for decades. Draven, Thornwild's presence loomed beside her, a living wall of steel and power. His eyes, storm-gray and relentless, scanned every shadow. He did not speak, but the rhythm of his breathing anchored her, a reminder that they would face this together. or die trying. The ruins themselves seemed to tremble, ancient stones humming faintly in response to her awakening blood. Hunters emerged like wraiths from the forest edge, their eyes glowing with unnatural hunger. Seren's pulse spiked, adrenaline coursing through her veins, fear and exhilaration entwined. She was no longer the fragile girl who had sat alone during the mating ceremony. Tonight, she was a force, part of something larger, something dangerous, something the world would not forget. And Draven, the alpha who had claimed her, stood as both protector and partner. Every muscle coiled, every instinct razor-sharp. The first wave of hunters surged forward, silent and precise, like shadows made flesh. Draven moved instantly, massive form twisting with lethal grace, sword-swinging arcs of dark energy that cut through the attackers. Seren mirrored him as best she could, silver blood pulsing in her palms, energy crackling, shaping itself with her intent. Her first strike sent a hunter sprawling into a stone pillar, shards flying. The second faltered under a pulse of her power that flared brighter than ever before. She gasped at the force she wielded, terrifying, exhilarating, alive. "Focus!" Draven growled, his voice carrying over the chaos. "Control it! Do not let it consume you!" Each heartbeat synchronized with his movements, each motion guided by his presence. The hunters hesitated for the first time, sensing her awakening strength, unsure how to counter something they could not understand. The ruins became a battlefield of raw energy and steel, shadow and silver. Every strike, every pulse, echoing with life or death urgency. For the first time, Seren realized that fear was no longer a chain. It was fuel. And with Draven at her side, she could harness it, shape it, make it a weapon. A hunter, larger and more grotesque than the rest, leapt directly at Seren. Her breath caught. Draven intercepted, swinging his sword to knock the beast aside, but the hunter's claws grazed her arm. Pain flared sharp and immediate, and with it, a surge of energy erupted from her blood, brighter, stronger, fiercer than ever. The hunter screamed, thrown backward, disoriented, his form flickering under the intensity of her power. Seren stumbled, but did not fall. Draven caught her instantly, pressing her close, his eyes locked onto hers. "Yes, that's it," he growled. "You are stronger than you think. Let it flow. Let it obey you." Silver energy danced along her limbs, wrapping around enemies, holding them at bay, forcing them to retreat. Panic, fear, hesitation. They could no longer touch her. She could feel her power sinking with Draven's presence. Each heartbeat, each breath, each step a dance of survival. The hunters, formidable and ruthless, faltered. The tide had turned, if only barely. And in that moment, Seren realized the depth of her transformation. She was no longer prey. She was a predator in her own right, untamed, silver-blooded, unstoppable when paired with the alpha who had claimed her. The battle intensified. Hunters came from every angle, shadows slashing, claws striking, teeth snapping. Draven moved like a living storm, his sword cutting arcs of lethal precision, deflecting attacks while simultaneously protecting her. Seren's blood pulsed faster, responding to every threat, every strike, every shadow. She lashed out, silver energy ripping through the air, scattering attackers. One hunter fell against the ruin's stones, hissing in pain. Another tried to flank her, only to be met with a pulse that sent him sprawling. Draven's voice carried through the chaos. "Do not hesitate. Now! Strike!" Seren obeyed instinctively, every fear transformed into action, every doubt shattered by necessity. And then she felt it. A deep, resonant connection with Draven. Not just trust, not just guidance, but a bond that ran through both of them like lifeblood. Every movement, every strike, every heartbeat was shared. They were unstoppable together. And even as hunters surged, even as shadows threatened, she realized she would not fall tonight. Not while he stood beside her. Not while her blood burned with power. Suddenly a piercing howl tore through the ruins, shaking the forest itself. From deeper in Hollowshade, reinforcements arrived, the Stormfell warriors, drawn by Draven's call. They crashed into the battle, tipping the scales further. Hunters faltered under the combined force, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Draven used the distraction to sweep Seren behind a broken wall, chest heaving. "You are ready," he murmured, voice low, almost reverent. "But the next step, you must embrace it fully. No fear, no hesitation." Seren nodded, pulse wild, adrenaline raging. She had survived attacks, awakened her blood, learned to control it, but the final act required complete surrender to her power. Her silver energy pulsed, brighter than the moon above, coiling around her like liquid light. The hunters sensed it, and fear rippled through their ranks. They had underestimated her. They had assumed fear would control her. They were wrong. And in that charged moment, Seren knew she was no longer the girl who had sat alone at the mating ceremony. She was a force to be reckoned with, and Draven Thornwild was the storm beside her. The largest hunter, grotesque and menacing, broke from the shadows, moving toward them with lethal speed. Draven stepped forward, sword raised, muscles tensed. Seren felt the pulse of her silver blood spike, energy flaring in response to the danger. Together they moved, a seamless rhythm of instinct, training, and raw power. Draven's strikes cut arcs of shadow. Seren's energy lashed, outward, forcing the hunter backward. The final confrontation was inevitable. They met in the center of the ruins, predator and predator, hunter and alpha, girl and giant. Energy collided with steel, silver fire meeting darkness. Seren poured every heartbeat, every pulse, every ounce of awakening blood into the attack. Draven fought with relentless fury, protecting, guiding, claiming. And then the hunter faltered, stumbling into the ruined stones, energy dissipating, fear flashing in its unnatural eyes. The remaining hunters scattered, retreating into the forest with haste, leaving the ruins echoing with silence, broken only by their labored breathing. Seren sank to her knees, chest heaving, limbs trembling. Draven knelt beside her, hands firm on her shoulders, eyes storm gray, intense, filled with pride, relief, and something unspoken. "You did it," he murmured, voice low, reverent. "You survived. You controlled it. You claimed your power." Seren's lips trembled. I couldn't have," she began, but he silenced her with a gentle shake of his head. "You did. We did. Together." A warmth spread through her chest, unfamiliar and fierce. The bond, forged in fire, silver blood, and shadow, had been sealed. They had faced death and emerged stronger. And for the first time the ruins felt like more than a refuge. They were a testament to her awakening, to her strength, to the force she had always carried inside. Hunters would come again. The world would continue to test her. But she had survived the crucible. And with Draven Thornwild beside her, she had learned the most essential truth of all. She was no longer alone. Not now. Not ever. The dawn crept over Hollowshade, pale sunlight spilling through the thick canopy, illuminating the Starfen ruins in a soft, silver glow. Seren Vale stood on the edge of the crumbled stones, her silver-touched blood still pulsing faintly, energy humming through every vein, every heartbeat. The night's battle had left the ruins scarred, stones cracked, moss torn, and the air thick with residual tension. Hunters had been driven back, but the threat still lingered beyond the forest's edge. Yet in that moment, amidst broken stone and whispered winds, Seren felt something she had never known. Control. Power. Belonging. She was no longer the frightened, fragile girl who had sat alone during the mating ceremony. She was the silver-blooded force that hunters and packs alike would remember. And standing beside her, massive, unyielding, his storm-gray eyes softening in the early light, was Draven Thornwild, the alpha who had claimed her, protected her, and believed in her when she could not believe in herself. His presence was a tether, an anchor, and a promise. "You're ready," he said quietly, voice rough but filled with certainty. "Today, the world sees you, and it sees me claiming what is mine." The words, simple but commanding, sent a shiver through her, a thrill mingled with fear. Claiming ownership, not of ownership in cruelty, but of protection, connection, trust, destiny. The pack began to gather, drawn by the battle, the blood, the energy still lingering in the ruins. Wolves of every rank, some tentative, others wary, surrounded Seren and Draven, eyes wide with recognition and awe. Whispers ran through the group. The silver blood, she survived. The Alpha claimed her. The prophecy, Seren's pulse raced, chest tight with anticipation and anxiety. She had faced hunters, awakened power she barely understood, and survived the crucible of blood and shadow. Now she had to face the scrutiny of her own kind. But Draven did not flinch, and his hand brushed hers lightly, grounding her. "Stand tall," he said. "Let them see who you are. Let them feel it. You are no longer hidden." She drew in a breath, tasting the crisp morning air, the lingering scent of battle, the faint hum of energy from her veins. And for the first time she understood what it meant to be seen. Not as weak, not as fragile, not as an outsider, but as herself, powerful, alive, claimed, and unstoppable. Maiulis, the elder who had once questioned her, stepped forward. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, softened as they met Serene's. "Child," she said, voice steady but reverent, "you have survived what few could. Your blood awakens, but it obeys your will. You have proven yourself not just to us, but to the very legacy that flows in your veins. The prophecy speaks of one who would rise amidst shadows, silver-blooded, to tip the balance between hunters and pack. That one is you." Seren's lips trembled, disbelief warring with the surge of pride and purpose. She had spent her life thinking herself invisible, powerless. And now the weight of destiny pressed on her, heavy but electric, filling her with clarity. Hunters would always lurk. Shadows would always threaten. But she had survived. She had awakened. And now she would lead, protect, and claim her place in the world. Draven's gaze met hers, storm-gray eyes softened with pride, relief, and unspoken promise. She didn't need words. The bond forged in blood and battle was enough. A sudden rustle came from the forest's edge, drawing every eye. Seren tensed instinctively, silver energy tingling in response. Hunters? Perhaps. But the motion was familiar. From the shadows emerged allies, pack members drawn by the call of battle and the scent of silver blood. Their presence solidified the sense of survival and unity, the knowledge that together they could face anything. Draven stepped beside her, sword at the ready, muscles taut, every instinct sharp. Yet this time, fear did not grip her. She drew strength from the bond they had forged, from the power flowing within her, from the acknowledgement of her own courage and ability. The hunters had tested her, the world had tested her, and she had passed. Not alone, but together, with Draven Thornwild standing beside her as both protector and partner. Draven's hand brushed hers, fingers warm and firm, grounding her in the moment. "Do you feel it?" he asked, voice low, intimate. "The world bending around you? The power you carry?" Seren nodded, eyes wide with awe. She could feel her energy resonating with the ruins, the forest, the pack. The silver blood was not just power. It was legacy, responsibility, and destiny. And as she stood side by side with Draven, she realized the depth of what he had said at the mating ceremony. Act like you're mine. Not as a command of possession, but as a promise of protection, connection, and shared destiny. She was his claim, as he was hers. Guardian, anchor, companion, alpha, and mate. And in that realization, a fierce warmth blossomed in her chest, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. She was no longer the girl who had sat alone, ashamed, rejected, forgotten. She was Seren Vale, silver-blooded, awakened, unstoppable. And she was claimed. The hunters, if they lingered in the shadows, could sense the transformation, the bond, the rising force. They would think twice before returning, and the pack, once hesitant and doubtful, now understood the truth. Seren was not fragile. She was not prey. She was the silver-blooded power of prophecy, alive and breathing, fully awakened. Draven's gaze softened further, eyes meeting hers with storm-gray intensity. "You are mine," he murmured, voice husky with emotion, the words carrying a depth that transcended ceremony, ownership, or tradition. "And I am yours, always." Seren's lips curved in a small, resolute smile. Fear, doubt, and uncertainty fell away like autumn leaves. Strength, power, and belonging surged in their place. She had survived hunters, shadows, the crucible of awakening. She had faced herself and emerged stronger. And now, standing beside Draven, silver blood shimmering, sunrise breaking over the ruins, she knew nothing would ever be the same. Not for her. Not for him. Not for the world that had tried to keep her small. She had been claimed. She had been awakened. And she had finally, irrevocably, found her place. Together they turned from the ruins, their bond unspoken, but undeniable. The pack followed, steps cautious but reverent, energy buzzing through the air. Hunters would come again, the forest would whisper threats, shadows would always linger, but Seren Vale no longer feared them. She had power. She had guidance. She had Draven Thornwild, giant, alpha, guardian, partner, mate. And together, they would face the storms ahead. She was no longer alone. She was never alone again. And for the first time, she felt the full weight of what it meant to be alive, powerful, and claimed. The prophecy had been fulfilled in that moment, not by magic alone, but by courage, trust, and the undeniable bond forged in blood and fire. The world could watch, could threaten, could challenge, but they would see, in her silver glow and Draven's storm-gray gaze, that nothing would ever take her from her place again. She had been claimed. She had awakened. She was Seren Vale, and she was unstoppable. Wow, what a journey. Seren Vale faced fear, awakened her power, and discovered a destiny she never knew existed. Did she make the right choices? Could she truly control the power within her? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me. If you were in her place, would you have embraced the silver blood or run from it? And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss the next epic story like this one. Share this with a friend who loves werewolf romance and action, because some stories are too good to keep to yourself. The night isn't over, and the next adventure is just around the corner. Let's see who survives, and who rises,